Hey folks, how's it going? This is Seagull here. So we got some interesting rumored information about Project X and also why we didn't get some very highly requested features such as cars, bands, spiral stairs, and more. This again comes from user Gloaming the Pain on atrl.net. So I'll leave a link to the Sims community article that gathers all this info in the video description below. And Gloaming the Pain claims to be a former employee of the Monkey Studio, which is under EA. They developed The Sims Free Play, and they also looked after The Sims Mobile for a brief period of time. So starting off here, RIP bands, cars, motorcycles, zombies, hotels, arcade machines, pool tables, spiral stairs, sad. And Gloaming the Pain responded to Superheroes saying, I can provide some context here actually. This was from when Fire Monkeys briefly looked after The Sims Mobile, but we collaborated a lot with Maxis, and most of what you mentioned haven't been added for a very specific reason. So when they talked about the way Sims 4 was developed, it was actually easier to greenlight new ideas than previous ones in some cases. When a pack gets made, or even a plan for upcoming content, the question that often got asked was, where is the data? A lot of returning content was often looked at from player data and statistics from The Sims 3. I'm not sure if The Sims 2 was included in that, but definitely Sims 3. So if an idea was pitched like spiral stairs, the immediate thing was to check the data. And if only a small portion of players actually used that feature or function, it was then looked to see if it was high cost, low value, or low cost potential value, etc. So something like pool tables was one of the things they discussed where very few players actually utilized them in Sims 3, and it was considered high cost, low value, where if they were to put a lot of effort into the item, but the same amount of players would actually use them, it was low value to the game for player satisfaction and high cost to do so. So they haven't done it. Yeah, pool tables, I can imagine taking a lot of animation work, but yeah, that's really unfortunate. Pretty much everything you mentioned was things that also came up for ideas for Sims Mobile, and the overall consensus was these ideas like band activities, spiral staircases, even cars and pop star careers, etc. were all things that players didn't actively pursue. We had ideas to do a pop star career where players from other games could join your concert, and the idea tested badly as it was one of the least used features in The Sims 3. I believe we did something with cars in the end, but I remember only a small percentage of Sims 3 players actively bought their Sims cars. Most just relied upon the taxis. So it was considered low value. So immediately if devs at Maxis try to pitch it, the higher ups will ask for the data, and if the data isn't there, tough luck. Wow! So all these years, people have been telling me, oh, The Sims 4 won't get cars because they wouldn't make sense without open world. The whole time, most players were not even using cars in the open world in the first place. That is hilariously ironic. When it comes to hotels, that explanation totally makes sense to me because I don't really see that many Simmers talk about taking vacations all the time with their Sims. It's just like an occasional thing. And then coupled with the mess that is for rent, and hotels would probably use something very similar to that, I can see them looking at something where hotels would be a high cost and not really have that much value. But with cars, wow, I was under the impression people loved cars in The Sims 3, even though I personally preferred The Sims 2's because there was more interactions and the Sims don't just teleport into the car. Continuing on, new ideas are a bit easier because they can run focus groups and surveys, asking players to vote for themes, and typically they will avoid adding tried and true themes to them if they want a new idea to work on. But in short, many things people ask for were simply denied for not being popular amongst players in previous games. I even heard they wanted to add food processors and got knocked back because they weren't used enough in The Sims 3. Okay, that I can believe. I rarely ever see people talking about food processors, and the same thing goes for the trash compactor. But basically, EA and Max's higher-ups are happy to throw money at things if the data from The Sims 3 suggests it will be popular. If the data says it's not, it's practically impossible to get it over the line. The only thing I saw that I was shocked to see that I knew was considered low priority, but still got made, was the interior design career. Apparently, players barely reached for it in The Sims 3, so really shocked they centered a whole game pack around it. Was a very weird moment, but potentially they had no other gameplay ideas to sell the assets for it. That last part I can believe, because The Sims 3 Ambitions, that was the expansion pack that the interior designer career came with. And from back in the day, I remember a lot more people being hyped for the firefighters, detectives, and ghost hunters. So that is funny that with The Sims 4, they just had some assets and they were like, oh, I don't know what to use this with. So they just brought back that career from The Sims 3 as a way to have some gameplay, but there was hardly any gameplay in that game pack to begin with. However, I think it's really flawed to rely so much on player data from The Sims 3 because, well, The Sims 4 is already pretty old, but The Sims 3 is obviously even older than that. So it is weird to me to rely so much on data that is almost 2 decades old. And also, what if it's because players didn't like how the features were done? It reminds me of like when people say, oh, you better not complain if such and such feature you want does get brought back. But it's like, well, what if the feature was done terribly? We're not allowed to complain about that? That'd be like if someone ordered a pizza and then they got completely different toppings than what they wanted, and then telling that person, well, you got a pizza, so shut up and be grateful. Then Never Really Over says, so at some point, they thought a game that can't have 2 launches loaded at the same time would be able to handle infinite DLC till the end of time. Excited for the next evolution. And Gloaming the Pain says, the game definitely could. It was the system requirements that likely stopped them. I know for a fact they had a functional prototype open neighborhood in Sims 4 for feature testing and it worked absolutely fine. Just exceeded the system requirements beyond what could be considered a reasonable jump. It was in the neighborhood where the Goths lived, and I even believe it's been used in trailers. That's right, it took me a second to remember, but this trailer they released when the game went free to play. They put this out, and the final shot here, yeah, like we have this active lot, and then we have a meteor striking the Goth house and a rocket ship taking off from the lot next to it. Normally, this is impossible because even though you can see the houses next to you, you don't see that sort of stuff going on. You don't see the Sims doing stuff inside. It's just the shell that you see of the lot from what you built on it, and that's it. You can still see stuff happening in the public space, which is not attached to any lot except the neighborhood itself, like with the fireworks that you can see off to the right where that public washroom is. So that's normal. But no, normally you would not be able to see a meteor crash into your neighbor's house or a rocket ship taking off unless that rocket ship was out in the public space, like in GeekCon in San Myshuno. One other thing to consider is maybe the meteor crash and the rocket ship were added in post-production, but the meteor crash especially looks really authentic with the way the light flashes and all that stuff after. It looks like it's in-game rather than just some sort of overlay that you would add in a video editor. Anyways, my point is, Gloaming the Pain might be thinking of this particular trailer where it does look like this is the open neighborhood that they had internally, and it's that same neighborhood they even mentioned. Gloaming the Pain responded to a couple users just asking about why is The Sims 4 ending and why is Project X a thing? Like, why is it happening? And Gloaming the Pain says that this next game is going to be an evolution of The Sims 4, but won't have everything carried over. But it is happening because of the EA buyout. Because EA is trying to massively cut costs. A new game without the backlog of having to make it work with older content, and designing a game to take advantage of all the AI tech available, which will cut costs massively. Sims 4 is very profitable and is one of the most profitable games they make, but they want to minimize how much money they put back into the game and starting fresh with cost-cutting measures in mind. So that's an easy way to do that. Very interesting. I was not sure whether the EA buyout started happening first or if Project X was in development before the buyout was even a concept. It could have gone either way, because even with this new base game not being a full-on sequel, it could have still taken a while, and then the EA buyout just ended up turning out to be a thing later. But okay, no, according to this person who used to work for EA Fire Monkeys, yeah, it is because of the buyout. And with that in mind, it does make a lot more sense why they're pivoting away from The Sims 4 as we know it and making this new base game where they won't have to worry as much about all this content that they've done over the past 11 years. I'm so not looking forward to seeing what sort of generative AI crap they will put in Project X though. Just ugh. It's also mentioned that The Sims Life Stories is not the best example when trying to compare it to what Project X is supposed to be, because Life Stories is just a spin-off, but Project X will look noticeably more advanced than the original Sims 4. And yeah, they do mention they used to work at Fire Monkeys, and Fire Monkeys used to work very closely with Maxis when they managed The Sims Mobile. They also mention EA was a great company to work for, but now they've effectively turned on their own staff by constantly telling them they're doing everything they can to make most of them redundant, so they have no loyalty to them anymore. Yep, no doubt that's to do with all the generative AI stuff. As a side note, Herbs and Bustin' Out were also brought up. So from memory, Herbs sold really badly and lost EA money from music licensing, etc. Dang, that's too bad. I didn't have Herbs back in the day, but that's unfortunate it didn't do well. But Bustin' Out, I believe, did really well. Just as well as The Sims 2 did as a whole. Its online component was one of the reasons EA pushed for online in Sims 4. Wait, what? Bustin' Out didn't have any online play, and I don't think the Sims 2 console did either. It definitely had split screen, because I played that with my friend before, but not sure what they're talking about here, unless specifically the PS2 and Xbox versions of Sims 2 had online multiplayer, because I know GameCube didn't always have online with games that were on the other consoles too. But I suppose back then it was the wow factor of playing online on your console. I think that once it wears off, people don't really have anything they want out of just The Sims, but online. Don't know anything about My Sims. I'm sorry, it was very separate from the main franchise that we had access to do and the stats, etc. That's too bad. I would have liked to know how well the My Sims games did back in the day, as well as the recent Cozy Bundle, because I know some people liked it, including myself, but I hardly ever see people talk about it now. I wonder how many people are still playing with the My Sims Cozy Bundle. Maybe it's just because they only brought back 2 games and haven't announced any plans to bring back the rest of them, or even make a new entry in the series. It is really unfortunate they didn't get around to doing any more of those before the buyout was announced. That is pretty much it. So while this is all rumor technically, I would not be surprised if this really is all the truth, because rumors with The Sims 4 tend to end up coming true these days more often than not. And that wraps up another Sims info and thoughts video, so feel free to let me know your thoughts on everything discussed in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe if you'd like to keep up with my latest gaming content. I will talk to you all later, and have a great day. Thanks for watching.